Welcome back to the Micromodule series, Understanding Bias in Epidemiological Studies. In this module, we'll be focusing on selection bias caused by healthy worker effect, which is typically seen in occupational health research. The objectives of this module are to introduce the concept of healthy worker effect, illustrate how it occurs, and introduce how to address the bias. In occupational health research, one may want to know whether workers in certain occupations have a higher risk of disease or mortality due to workplace exposures. For instance, whether miners have a higher death rate compared to the general population. However, due to healthy worker effect, workers exposed to obvious risk factors may exhibit a similar or even lower risk of disease or mortality. Healthy worker effect is a bias caused by health-based selection into or out of employment, where employed populations are generally healthier than the general population. Here is an example. A study compares mortality rates between construction workers who are exposed to physical hazards and the general population to assess whether construction work increases the risk of early death. In this study, healthy worker effect may result from the selection at higher in the selection during employment. Construction jobs require physical fitness, so workers who get hired for the jobs are generally healthier than the general population in the first place. Those with chronic illnesses or disabilities are less likely to be employed in physically demanding jobs. During the employment, workers who develop severe health problems may leave employment, making the remaining group healthier than the initially hired workers as well as the general population. Thus, when compared to the general population, which includes unemployed, disabled, and chronically ill people, the current construction workers may appear to have lower mortality, even if their job carries risks. As a result, the study may underestimate the true risk of mortality associated with construction work, because the exposed group who are current workers is inherently healthier at baseline than the unexposed group, who is the general population. This could mask real occupational hazards, such as increased risk of injuries or long-term health effects from dust exposure. Another example is that early studies on asbestos workers initially showed lower mortality than the general population due to the healthy worker effect, delaying recognition of asbestos-related cancers. However, later comparisons with other employed groups who were not exposed to asbestos revealed the true risk. So how to deal with healthy worker effect in occupational health research? The first approach is to track both current workers and former workers, as less healthy workers may leave employment early due to illness. Including both current workers and former workers who left due to illness can make the workers group more representative of all workers and thus reduce selection bias caused by healthy worker effect. The second approach is to compare workers to a different occupational group, such as office workers, rather than the general population. In this case, both the exposed group and unexposed groups are current workers who have experienced similar selection process at higher and during the employment, making them comparable in terms of health status at baseline. The third approach is to compare active workers with different levels of exposure in the same workplace, such as high level versus low level of exposure. This approach would make it more appropriate to attribute the difference in outcomes to the exposure per se. Okay, in this module, we discussed healthy worker effect in occupational health research and the strategies to address it. In next module, we will introduce the selection bias caused by loss to follow-up. Thank you for listening.